Okay, showtime, guys. So happy that you guys are here with me. Really excited to jump into this with you. The name of this session, Why High Performers Get Trapped as Senior Doers and How to Break Out. Really excited to share this with you guys. And just at the beginning here, because you might be watching this or you might be tuning in for the first time, and right from the get-go, you might be saying, okay, am I in fact a senior doer? Who is this for? So I'm doing this for a couple of specific people I've noticed in my years as a coach and an expert. Okay. Number one, this session is for leaders who have done everything right and are now paying for it. So what do I mean? Loyal operators who keep getting passed over while other people advance, and you don't know why. High performers who are essential to execution. You may have actually heard this from your boss or other team members. We literally could not do this without you. But when it comes to the big decisions, you're sidelined. You're not taken seriously in that way. Maybe you're a STEM or technical leader who came up that way, transitioned to leadership, but guess what? You're not treated as the leader that you want to, right? The return on effort that you expect is going to be there when the time comes for influencing others, doing the stuff that you can't just grunt your way through. Oh, that's when you realize they still look at you in a marginalized way. So what's going on there, right? Marginalization overall is the biggest clue here. Okay. So just being very real with you, because I'm lucky enough, in my work, people feel comfortable sharing their truth with me, right? Not the PR version of what's going on in their lives, but when it comes to their careers, their aspirations, what's actually happening. And I know that if you get beyond the nice little PR version, this stuff is happening all the time to senior doers, right? Lateral title changes without any real authority, right? Senior director of X, then senior director of X plus Y, then global director of X and Y and B. You understand what I'm saying, right? But if you look underneath, the job itself is not changing. That's no bueno as it relates to your career and how it's going to be perceived in the future, right? Your compensation is stagnating, right? Many senior doers already know that they're not getting paid like top dollar in terms of what they could be earning at the company within their industry. They're okay with being screwed a little bit. But what we'll see and what we're seeing is multi-year stretches of like huge accomplishments that you're doing, huge things that you're doing to change things forward. But the comp is basically staying in cost of living, right? The comp is not changing, right? Even the title changes, but the comp doesn't change. Huge problem, right? And then shrinking influence over strategy, resourcing, and team management, among with other areas, right? So bottom line is you're working your ass off. For whatever reason, you're doing more than ever. You're not trusted, right? And most importantly, you're not advancing in the way that you would like. That's what I want to start addressing here, hopefully in a way that will cause some ahas in you, okay? So what happens to this pattern right now? Because you might be saying, look, it's short term, it's this company, they made promises, we had a bad quarter, things will turn around, we just got bought out, whatever the excuses are, right? I want you to think leader here. And I want you to think in terms of not just your role for a second, but your legacy, like the full sum total of your journey and what you're building, right? If this pattern of senior doing without that authority doesn't get solved, right? Inevitably, a couple of things that happen: career growth. You know this, we're already talking about this, right? It'll stop being like this silent thing that you're covering for, and it'll start to become very obvious, right? Burnout, if you're experiencing it right now, you're probably dealing with it alone, and you're probably saying, how much can I recover in order to get back into it? Senior doers usually are carrying a habitual load of chronic stress and burnout, right? But what happens is if this thing isn't addressed, people feel comfortable taking more and more from you and giving you less and less, right? And so the episodes of burnout happen more frequently and they last longer, right? And that's really hard. I can tell you from personal experience, that's really hard to get back to. It felt to me like I was coming back like after a huge illness and like my mind was not working correctly. That's how it felt for a while. It's a terrible feeling, right? And not one that, if you're a high performer, I hope you never have to experience, right? And certainly never have to experience again, but it happens more when this problem is here, right? You go from rising star to convenient scapegoat, golden boy to why isn't this working? Why isn't this impossible thing that we didn't even, you've been telling us we need more headcount. We didn't give you the headcount. And now we're blaming you for the lack of performance, right? What's happening? Imposter syndrome for high performers is chronic. Okay. So the more capable you are, the more ambition you have, chances are, the more that doubt voice is going. Well, If you're in a role and you're providing all of this heart, soul, emotion, commitment, all that good stuff, right? And you're not getting anything back, or you're not getting anything close to it back. Well, listen, it doesn't matter what your self-motivation tapes tell you, right? That dissonance will tell something to your mind and your heart that says something's wrong here, right? You're doing all of this, you're not getting it back. Is that our lot in life? And that makes it really hard. Eventually, what happens is, if you're a smart high performer who never gets a handle of this, you start getting used to being taken advantage of, right? And so what I'll see over, a lot, and I'm going to be very honest with you, at this point, it's too late, right? Is when people start looking at this not as a problem or a challenge in their leadership journey, but literally a chronic condition that they'll never be able to solve. Okay, that's when you're going to change your worldview. Every company is like this, so why bother? Every boss is like this, so why bother? When I moved from India, I never thought that I would ever be a VP of a FANG company. Can't I just be happy with that? Wouldn't the friends that I hung out with and played soccer with when I was 8, wouldn't they be impressed by my life? Again, you see this. It's this externalization of your own ambitions, because there's a deep, deep fear and a growing sense that, like, you're incapable. You will not be able to solve it. So why put yourself through that pain? That's a problem. And I want you to understand the reason why is because you stayed what's called performant in a system that had no incentive to promote you beyond that utility. Okay, so let me just repeat that because it's such an important concept. Grab a pen, write this down, okay? Because I want this to really stick with you, okay? You are staying performant, meaning you're choosing to make the only way we can evaluate you based on what you can do and how much of it, right? You're insisting on doing that without playing the other keys that they're looking for. And because you're doing that, you yourself are putting yourself into a box where your utility is the only thing that matters, right? And so when you do that, listen, there's no reason for a boss or a company to look out for you, right? If you're not looking out for yourself and you yourself are putting yourself into that box, there's nothing that you can do, right? It's like in a relationship, it's never really a good idea for a man or a woman or whoever, if you're starting a relationship, to start out being like, I'm so lucky, I don't deserve you, you're way more beautiful than I am, you're way more gifted than I am, I'm just a loser, it's not going to work, right? You guys could be like the perfect match, but if that's the signal, how is that person going to respect you? Why would they treat you in a higher way than you yourself are enabled to do? That's the line that this presentation draws, okay? So if you're looking for, and I know high performers, you love this lie. I'm just doing research. I'm just doing training. I just look for a little motivation. Look, if that's what you're looking for, this is probably not going to do anything for you, right? If you're looking for a way to push harder, I'm not going to give you more drugs to the drug addict, right? That's not for you, okay? This is for the people who are here who can feel that something has shifted and they know this feeling isn't good, and I can feel that there's some real risk here, okay? So for them, just pull this. I saw this right here in the Get Motivated subreddit and Reddit. No, yeah, you better believe I'll hop on Reddit as a time waster. I'm guilty of that, absolutely. What you are not changing, you're choosing. Okay, so I want to invite you, right, to really look at this now, and I want to invite you with a degree of hope, informed hope, and courage to say, look, let's do this and let's see how you can address this, because you've addressed literally every other challenge in your life. Let's cut the bullshit about saying that you can't do this. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. I want this to be tied in so that you understand exactly the ground that we're going to be covering here. Okay, no mystery. Number one, the core lie that all overperformers, including myself, internalize. Okay, and how it sort of keeps you stuck in approval to these different personality types, right? And bosses instead of ownership. Okay, ownership is a very key word, and I want you to really think about that, okay, as we move forward. Why just invest in yourself more? Okay, you might have heard this from bosses who are screwing you over for a promotion, right? Or like whenever they're breaking a promise that requires them following through, acting on your behalf, and they don't do it, a lot of times they'll try to scapegoat it by saying, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you did everything we asked you to do, but there's this new, moving the goalpost, there's this new thing that you need in order for us to feel comfortable. You need to have this advanced degree. You need to have this credential. You need to chair this committee so that we can see you're good with your soft skills there before we promote you and have you taken care of whatever, right? That thing is a scam. That you need to see that, because that particular line of BS works especially well for senior doers, because you have a predilection to consider yourself insufficient. You have a predilection to say, oh no, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing it. So they know that. So they know, instead of following through, you're not going to stand up to make that decision, right? You're not going to have a really uncomfortable conflict-ridden solution, like conversation, because they need to act, right? If I tell you there's something else that you don't miss, you have a predilection to go, oh yeah, of course. And it's easier for you because you get to avoid conflict, necessary conflict, in favor of more busy work. And you get to kick this can down another 6 months to a year plus. And this thing gets worse, sometimes irrevocably worse, right? So I want you to cut that nonsense out. If you're taking this training right now, you've got everything that you need in terms of qualifications. You're not a student anymore, okay? You don't have to go into good student mode, and it's a huge trap to do so, right? Confidence hacks, motivational advice. This stuff is not going to work if you're this type of a personality type, right? You're not some type A blowhard, right? So that kind of advice, when you try to do it, it comes across like you're performing, right? It comes across like you're acting and being a leader. And that makes you seem 10 times more of an imposter, okay? So I'm also going to be showing you a little bit of the difference between leadership that feels solid, grounded, and calm, okay? Versus leadership that quietly signals, hey, I'm still auditioning. I'm still trying to win you over, right? Finally, and I want this for you if you're here with me, okay? I want you to see this change if you're serious about changing something. How do you reclaim resilient authority and influence, the real stuff, without this kind of performative nonsense, without playing political games or being disconnected from yourself? So fundamentally, this is not about polishing what you're doing, right? It's not about doing more of that, right? Really, it's about replacing the crappy operating system that you have right now and replacing it with something that is actually battle tested, that is strong, that is resilient enough to get it done. Okay. So I'm wearing this watch here. This is called a Vostok Amphibia. This is like an old school Russian watch from like the 1960s, right? And to me, this is like a great example of resilience and strength that doesn't call attention to itself, okay? It's not fancy, it's not expensive, but what it does is, as the pressure rises, as you dive deep into the water, as you go into places unknown, it actually gets stronger. It is there for you. It is reliable. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it, right? And that's the kind of leadership, and that's the kind of feeling that you really want to be imparting to others as you lead, okay? So if you're just being acclimated to who I am, I don't want to belabor this. I'm sure this is the part where most people's eyes glaze over. It certainly is for me. By the numbers, 16 plus years now of transformational coaching, 2,100 leaders and high performers elevated, featured in places like MSNBC, Fast Company, iHeartRadio, more places to mention here. I believe that overlooked leaders aren't the problem. I believe that they are the missing link, and they are the missing perspective right now. I believe that overperformers have the highest capacity for decisive action once the pattern is clear, okay? I'm the creator of what's called the press system, which is a full operating system for leaders who need to be authoritative when stakes are high, not just on good days, not just when you feel like it, not just when something good happened in your life, okay? And then downstream results, pretty predictable, right? We'll cover one or two of these really briefly as we go through, but faster promotion cycles are to be expected, corrected comp, expanded scope, and the big one that senior doers seem to have a lot of trouble accepting, which is that ascension happens and you get more of your life back, not less. If you're assuming or you're scared of rising up because the way you've gotten here has been taking time away from your family, I can understand why you would be terrified about doing something else, right? And go back to old patterns. Let me assure you, if you're doing it right, you're supposed to get your cake and eat it too. No one rises up to the CXO in order to be a worse slave than they did when they were starting out as barely out of an intern, right? So let's dump that idea. That's a symptom of the bad way you've handled this. It's not indicative of the reality that's out there, okay? Real problem, right? You have not hit your ceiling because you lack ability. I think you know this, right? You've hit this ceiling, right, of being valuable. You've gone as far as you can go as like the guy or the person who can do, okay? And now what's happening is you're treating what needs to be a leverage problem, like utilizing your power, utilizing your influence, right? In the room right there. Instead of doing that, you're going back to performance, right? Okay, work harder, refine more, absorb more, right? Explain better. But every single one of those things is making it worse, right? It's the wrong tool for the job. Here's what they're actually evaluating, and I want you to really take this in, okay? Ownership. Can you own the domains of what you do without asking or requiring my permission or anyone else's? Are you steady when the pressure increases, when there's conflict, when I don't buy who you guys are as a leader, when I'm like not going to do that and I'm going to add pressure? How are you? Or do you still go back to the right principles? You still go back to an objective that you're connected with? Or do we see you, again, revert back to good student employee, right? Where are your boundaries? Senior doers replace boundaries with work, right? So that thing you should have said no to or delegated or had a conversation about, you're so petrified of having that conversation, so utterly unable to like handle that you just add it onto your plate, and you add it onto your plate, and you add it onto your plate, and then you're wondering why bitterness is there, right? There's no boundaries here. You don't feel safe with communicating boundaries. So nobody has boundaries, and no one's going to respect those when the pressure comes, right? That's what it's all about. That's what I want you guys to see. I want you to see the trap that you're in right now through a clear lens, because otherwise, like, that voice is going to claim all of this to be virtue. You're just some like misunderstood genius who, no one's going to get. Bullshit. Not true. Never going to be true. So here's a couple of the things I want you to anticipate and I want you to be thinking about, okay? These are signs that the larger changes happen, okay? Number one, you hold rooms with presence and silence, not effort. Okay. You engage senior leaders as a peer, right? Without constantly negotiating or renegotiating your authority. You tolerate tension and conflict without emotional fallout. You set boundaries and you enforce consequences without drama. When was the last time that happened in your life? When was the last time that you went out of your way to do that? Reactive leadership. That means you're going to find it when you're there. You start feeling this overwhelm and you're making it up as you go along, right? That's where a lot of freezing and rambling happens, right? All of that starts to get replaced with deliberate, directed action. Usually that starts before you ever enter that room, right? And finally, your identity should be expanding beyond the limits of this reliable doer and into ownership, into that stance where you can say, this is my domain, this is what I do, I'm ready for it, let's go. So here's the line. Here's what it requires right at the beginning, okay? We are going to be willing. I'll put my hand up here as well, okay? Put that hand up if you're serious about this, okay? Let's say right now, we're going to stop optimizing for performance and we're going to start by taking a stand. Okay? That's where the first shift happens. Okay? There's going to be 5 here, and I want you to see how they work together. They will get you out, right? It depends on you, though, to really absorb this now. All right? Number 1, I hope it gets the hackles up for some of you, right? Kill the people pleaser, right? So what does that mean? You cannot lead while you're auditioning for approval. So long as there's anything in you that is like pulling your punches, because at the end of the day, this person thinking well of you is more important than this person respecting you and doing business with you with integrity. That right there will kill your relationships at the high level. Okay. Here's the uncomfortable truth here that I want you to understand. People pleasing is not a personality quirk. It's not an eccentricity, right? It's a career limiting survival strategy. You started people pleasing because at a certain point, right? Take it from a recovering people pleaser, okay? That was your best way to move it forward. That was the best way that you can get your parents, your authority figures, well, whatever, on your side. They're not going to pay too much attention to you. They're going to respect you for the right things. You're going to please, you're going to adapt to who they are. Here's the problem, right? At a certain point, maybe even now, it feels like you're being reasonable, collaborative, low ego, professional, all that stuff. If you're from Southeast Asia, you will feel this even more, okay? Because it's almost like a cultural practice there, okay? But here's the problem. At the high level, it says, if I stay agreeable and useful, I'll stay safe. And that will fail at the top. Look, bottom line, you have to have a degree of ownership there that is not conditional to your role. You need to be able to look someone in the eye, regardless of their hierarchy, and be honest and truthful with them. And they need to feel that and know it. Otherwise, there will not be trust, right? So to go a little deeper into this, people pleasing doesn't work when it's received at the senior leaders, because what worked down below now looks docile. It looks safe. Why are you doing this? Why are you selling to me when I need someone with ideas who can challenge me? So some practical ways: saying yes when the scope is wrong. You know that, and you say yes anyway, you're going to figure it out. Absorbing responsibility without authority. People dump, maybe even other division heads, dump problems onto your lap, and you have no idea what to do aside from quietly, essentially wrapping your mind around it and doing it, right? Softening positions, right? Softening a stance. That's the wrong thing to do, right? That's not the priority that we need to be focusing on right now. Being unable to say no, and for you to feel that's a no, right? When we talk to you as a leader, when you say yes, that should be like freaking Fort Knox. And when you say no, that should be a complete and full sentence. Senior doers can't exercise that. They cannot tap into that, right? And so people pick up on that and they start taking advantage of you, right? You're waiting for alignment, right? You're carrying tension that belongs to other people. Why? Okay, why? When this team member that you have, okay, listen, I was talking with someone, they're dealing with a team member whose performance is flatlining. Yes, absolutely, that's something that you should look at. There are things that you can do as a leader, hopefully, to address it. But what this person did is literally added 10 to 15 hours a week doing the person's job, literally doing it for them without them knowing, because they were so petrified that the bosses, their bosses, his bosses, would judge him, that he's willing to do anything behind the scenes, right? So this person doesn't learn. This person flames out, worse. The leader is here, unable to perform, he's losing track of his priorities. And the top is looking at this being like, wow, who is this guy? Why is he always busy like this? Why does he always seem that there's 5 other freaking priorities that's on his mind? When is he going to be here with me? When are we going to listen? When are we really going to talk? They don't see that. They see busy work, right? And so without that ownership, the imbalance of this, right, becomes basically you have no standards, so you'll adapt to any system, no matter what the cost, right? This person will carry any weight, right? And that's what scapegoating is, right? Scapegoating is not somebody waking up one day with some evil plan to marginalize you. It's a place that has reached its tolerance for change. It cannot address or look at the deeper things. And now you, one of the few people who are driving real change, goes from yay, 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 stay away from me, to boo, 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 stay away from me. That's marginalization. That's scapegoating. Okay. Now, and if you understand this, you can start to avoid this unbelievably devastating trap, right? So it requires a stand, guys. It does not require more action. It requires some ballsiness if you have it. All right. Here's the stand I want to invite you to make. Okay. Because nothing else we discuss is going to stick unless you have this act of courage, this baseline level. Okay. Here's what it is. I'm done trading approval for access. Okay. It doesn't mean you're becoming a different person. It doesn't mean that you're becoming Mr. Aggro or Miss Aggro. Okay. It means you are, though, ending the habit of self-erasure. Okay. Because all of this is erasing your truth in order to make life easier for someone else. You're lying through omission. And that cannot stand. That cannot stand at the leader. We don't want that person. Nobody wants that person. You are truly a vulnerability and a red flag as long as you do that. So here's the thing. Do you have the balls to say, look, I'm going to name those trade-offs instead of absorbing them? I'm going to set the boundaries instead of just hoping that other people play fair. I'm going to require that authority is and accountability are 2 parts of the same world. One cannot be there without the other, right? And above all, I'm not going to be the person who has to solve everything. I'm not the fixer for this entire company. I cannot change this company, okay? I cannot change you. I can't change you. I can do what I can do. I can influence up to the point. Then it's yours. And if you're unable to do that, I'm really sorry, but that is on you. That is your problem, right? And so being able to have those tensions, being able to have people who might be even trying to blame you or scapegoat you, take in that information, respond to it in an effective way without being taken in by it, without being enmeshed by it, okay? This is very, very key, guys, okay? These are skills that really determine how high someone goes at this point. You've heard it. I'm sure you've heard it, but you've never really taken it in, right? Capability gets you to a certain point. At the level you're at, social, relational, behavior, these things start becoming dominant, right? Because there's a flattening out. Almost everyone here is highly capable in their own domains. So that doesn't count. Now these other things count. And if you've been ignoring them, that's your ringing bell. Okay. This is what I haven't been looking at. So the diverging point, and let me just be very honest, it's why I'm taking some time out from my coaching sessions today to go over this, right? Most doers don't get out of this trap. There's literally entire industries like big tech that relies on, for example, people who came in on an H-1B, did amazing, totally exceeded all those limits, have risen up. Guess what? You're making 40% less than your peers. And you've been making 40 to 60% less than them your entire career. So when you discover something like that, right, which is a clear sign of this, by the way, right? You don't have an H-1B issue. You have none of those restrictions, but you're still acting and doing the job as though you did, right? So most will choose to stay agreeable. Most will choose this secondary line. Most will keep adding pain behind the scenes so long as other people don't see it, because they can hide the shame away, right? The few who really now start using what they have to really go into beautiful places, to really start adventures, they have to make this stand. I'm willing to be seen, even if it costs me approval, even if I don't get along, even if worst case scenario, this job doesn't work out, even if this team doesn't work out, or I have to make radical changes. I want to make a promise that it's for the right reasons. Because if I can act and lead from a place of integrity and truth, then I'm okay with handling whatever outcomes may come. But if I'm stuck in people pleasing, what you're saying is you cannot handle a no. You are so freaking petrified of any negative thing that some Tom, Dick, and Harry can do that you are willing to preemptively give up on your sense of self, preemptively give up on your truth. How can anyone trust you? So it's time to really look at that. And if you need help with that, get the help that you need. But it's time to stop having such a low self-esteem where every single thing about your professional life is this freaking conditional and is this easily affected by the things of others. High-level leaders will sometimes test you just to test you. They're not serious about it, but they want to see how you respond. Can you take a little bit of pleasant jocularity? Or are you someone who's so insecure, so rigid that you break apart? Oh, that tells me something, okay? Let's not bring him into the room, okay? He's not ready for that yet. So this is what happens. This scope narrows, authority evaporates under pressure, right? There's a false bullshit authority that you'll have sometimes, right? That they'll give it to you after you've overworked, but that goes away the second that it's a real dialogue, right? With real stakes attached, right? You inherit risk without control and you become essential but non-expandable, right? And you harden that way, right? And then one day what happens is, as it is for many, many people I've spoken to over the years, despite their hard work, one day you realize that it's never not like the doors like dramatically shut. You just never stepped through it. And now it's too late. You're too old. You've been there for too long. The negatives of that company are now like looked at as a part of your career narrative as well. It's been years since you spoke to anyone new. It's been years and years since you stood up for yourself, right? You don't have that muscle. You let that die. And now when it's too late, when you're in your late 50s, 60s, whatever, right? Desperately looking for some kind of a reinvention, where are you going to go? This needed to have come from you, right? And you said no to it in favor of their priorities your whole life, right? So it's not going to work, right? I want to share a story here of Nikhil, who loved this guy, right? Landed, this is a downstream result that he got, but I don't want you to get hung up on that, okay? Nikhil, okay, was that person that everyone relied on, okay? He is that guy, 16 to 17 hour days, global installations, he had that. But the recognition never caught up, right? It was always, right, what you can do for me over who you are, right? So for him, right, working with him in this ownership piece, right, He goes in, right? He's working, he goes into for an interview at a major electric vehicle manufacturer here, right? They go in, right? It's an absolutely insane ramp up that they're talking about, right? It's like within 6 months, you got to do the work of basically 2.5 years. I think you can guess the company that we're talking about, maybe those of you who are shrewd, right? And so this manager, right, is getting all of they're talking to all these high performers, right? And each and every one of them, yes, we can, absolutely. What can we do? Here's what we can do. Great. Nikhil went in there and he basically said, how is this possible? It's not that I'm against it. It's so unprecedented. Right now, I don't see a way that we're going to do that. What is currently in place to enable this? Where are we with these? And he starts asking specific, respectful, challenging questions to understand from a not yes, sir, but from a, okay, are we talking to crazy people here? Right? Or are we talking to people who are, engineers, people who can actually do something here? And B, if we are going to do this, specifically, he's taking ownership of the role before he had the role, right? And he's saying, this is the information that I would need. This is the reality check that I would need here. This is what it is. And he's asking those questions. He's not pulling any punches. This is why he got the role. This is why the next chapter in his life jumped forward in the way that it did, right? Nikhil was able to understand that sharing your truth without and losing that fear all the time of something bad happened, right? You can do something bad. Yeah, bad things can happen. But if you act bravely in this way, it's actually less likely that it's going to happen. Because when you behave and operate from a place of accountability and ownership, the bad actors can pick up on that signal. And it's like a light to the wolves. It kind of pulls them away, right? People pleasing and senior doing does exactly the same, does exactly the opposite. Okay. So shift 2. Okay. So now we know, number 1, okay, like the invitation, the must do here. Are you willing to align to this? I'm willing to be seen, even if it costs me approval. Are you willing to tell your truth, stand in your power, regardless of what happens? If you're unable to do that, it's you have no leverage in any high stakes situation. Okay. You only have as much leverage as your ability to say no determines, right? A people pleaser has no. Number 2 is stop leaking your state. Okay. And so here's what I mean by that. Obviously, after decades in your industry, after all of these roles, obviously it's not the words, right? Why do I see people with literally huge amounts of experience going crazy over slide decks? You know those people and have worked with those people for the last 5 years. Why do you need to put together a slide deck? Why can't you just really talk to them? Why are you sitting on the fact that the CEO said something that really sort of like undercut totally your sense of self publicly in front of other people? Why are you ignoring that in favor of the pitch that you need to do here in 20 minutes? What's going on here? What's happening is, like, when you're a senior doer, you always de-emphasize your emotional state, your nervous system state. Those are less important than the ego of your intellect, right? And so that gets all of the attention. And again, rather than listening to your instincts, getting help, getting support in dealing with the human dynamics of your job, you are putting it into a zone that you think you can control, right? Which is work, right? So you think you're in there and you're talking with that CXO or whoever who really actually honestly is quietly thinking about getting you out. They don't like you. They've never liked you. You're a threat. Your capability makes it very clear that you could do their job, even though your lack of self-esteem, it hasn't even occurred to you yet, right? So that's what's actually going on behind the scenes, right? And the more you pitch, the more you ignore the truth of that, the more you tell me something, right? I can get away with it. I can get away with anything with you, right? Because I can bully you and you're just going to take it. You're going to treat it as a you problem instead of when it's clearly a me problem, right? And so they're not listening. Before people start listening to your ideas, right? Logic, reasoning, accuracy, all of that. The first things are steadiness, right? Are you fully aroused and on your head, or are you calm? Are you present there? Can we feel that? Where are you oriented? Is it like a chicken with his head cut off waiting for approval? Or do you know where you're going? Do you know this is the key idea? This is the key thing that we need to fix, right? Can you orient others around that? Let's get back on track here, right? What's your tolerance for tension? And do you stay centered when challenged? Okay. These are the big ones, okay? These are the ones that when, like, the second you walk in, these are the intangibles that are being put together. And first, you need to pass that check. First, you need to be able to feel like someone who has this handled, right? In order for us then to start looking at your ideas. But the problem is, if you're a senior doer, because you ignore your emotional state and all that stuff, like you suppress it, so it's not important to you. And so you think it's not important to other people. So you operate as though it's not important. And what you show is that in many ways, you're crippled as a leader, right? Because it's like a car needs an engine, tires, doors, or whatever. You got no doors, you got no windows, and you're driving this thing with your wind freaking, the comb over freaking flying out there, pretending that everything's normal, right? It's that essential, right? Here are some ways that it actually manifests, okay? I want you to ask yourself how many of these have been coming out recently, okay? Talking faster and faster. The less connected you are to people in the room, the faster this problem becomes, right? Explaining more than is necessary, right? Chasing, explaining, and defending are the three horsemen of the apocalypse of executive presence, okay? Chasing, explaining, and defending. So I want you to ask yourself, is the majority, and be very real, is the majority of your role, in fact, this? I'm not going to tell you one or the other. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to get to know you one-on-one. But I'm asking you, if you're really honest about it, what percentage of the job is this? 50%? 60? 70% plus? How much of your actual time is spent doing this? Because this is your clarion bell, okay? So qualifying statements, pre-answering objections, softening edges mid-sentence, avoiding anything that might cause a conflict or cause something that needs to be negotiated, right? So that's where the authority collapses. When we see someone who's not, like, you're denying reality, you're denying the reality in yourself, you're denying the reality dynamically of what's going on in this room, and you're insisting on doing this thing, that tells me weak. That tells me ineffectual. That tells me imposter. That tells me someone who doesn't belong. That tells me just give me data points, leave that deck on the table, and get the hell out of here. It's also why when you get advice like just speak up more, right? It's so dangerous, right? Because again, if you do that, it's more performance, right? And because the actual state inside has not been affected, has not been optimized, right? All of this makes it worse. So you have a desperate person trying to be confident, right? You got a person who's freaking out, just trying to speak up more, right? You got a guy who's projecting authority somehow by stiffening his shoulders, while the guy is, who he should be having a real honest dialogue with, or should have this week, is secretly laughing behind his back in the room, right? That's called leakage, right? And for you as the person, it's going to come across as strain, right? And that strain that we're talking about here, that's not leadership. So here's where it comes from, right? Again, it's coming root from a place of trying to control things that are not in your domain to control, and taking responsibility and letting your performance be impacted that way, right? Trying to manage other people's reactions in real time. Okay? So what does that mean? That means you don't rush to fill silence. Okay? If they're silent and they're taking it in, no problem. That's effective containment. You don't chase agreement. I can lay out what those are, and I can respect you enough to come to it on your own mind. If we need to talk further, let's talk further about this. I want to know how your thinking evolves on this. I don't need to force you into a commitment. I don't need to desperately push in that way, right? You don't collapse when challenged. You can have the hardest things and be like, look, I can, acknowledge that may be how you feel. This is what we're seeing, right? And specifically when it comes to this is what I see. This is where it's going. What do you think about that? How does that impact your decision-making and your own thoughts on that, right? I can give you my position, right? Your anger, your conflict is just a position, right? I can communicate mine, and a lot of times just being able to meet that will neutralize the worst of it, right? Bottom line is, can you stay where you are and have the room move towards you, okay? So here's the key takeaway, okay, from this section here. It's simple, but it's ruthless, okay? Your state first, your word second. State first. That state needs to be addressed first. It needs to authentically change in a way that you can feel in your core and your nervous system to align with what you want to do, to make it more conducive. Word second. Not state ignored, Not state doesn't matter. Not state is the domain of stupid people or politics or whatever, right? That's not a glorious mind person, right? State first, word second, always, okay? The top performers understand this. They are masters at state shift. So what does that mean? The bad news that you got that ruined you for the day, they take that in. They feel what they're going to feel. They respond in the way that they're going to respond. But it's a 15-minute issue, not a day-long disruption, right? That's controlling state. When your state works with you as opposed to against you, you bounce back, you can move forward, you can do stuff you never thought possible because you're not fighting this battle between like what you're saying and what you're feeling, right? Those two things really do need to start working together. Otherwise, your leadership, like your presence is never going to feel congruent, right? And so the second you start moving towards this, okay? And I want to be very clear here. There is no perfection. There is no moment in time where you're going to feel magically ready to do any of this. It's about the willingness to take the actions. It's about the willingness to try and fail. It's about the willingness to put yourself in there and let what is happening in the room affect your self-worth, self-determination, self-motivation to take the next step, because you will see immediate changes. The second you start really doing this, you will see de-escalating tension. Challenges lose their bite. Interruptions decrease. People listening to you in a different way. They're quietly leaning in. They're not just like having their eyes glazed over, watching another presentation that you could have done in your sleep, right? Because you're not confident enough to engage in a different way. This is what power really looks like. Roberto, I know I have this Frankenstein face, but I was just thinking about this, before hopping onto this session today. So I worked with this client, Roberto, high-level logistics, like super, super, super effective leader. He's C-suite now, but when I worked with him, he was in the SVP like level and really struggling there, right? And so what his wife would say, okay, and what he acknowledged right at the beginning of our working together was like, look, Anish, I get what you're saying. I understand. Yes, I've made that stand. Yes, I'm not going to like make this problem worse. Yes, I can stand for that. Yes, I want to change my state. Absolutely. But here's the problem. My wife says that I have Frankenstein face. And when I look in the mirror, I'm sort of like that. I just have trouble expressing. It's not that I don't feel it. It's not that I don't get excited or not or whatever. It's that my face, it's a little stone-faced, right? And so when we start working together, one of the initial things was, hey, how can we address this, right? Like, what's a way to mitigate or manage or navigate the work that you're doing to accommodate this or to, compensate for it? And as he started not waiting for perfection, but really making those changes in the room, really bringing these concepts in there, warts and all, right? He started noticing something. He doesn't need to change his performance. All he needs to do when he's meeting someone new, right, is to say, look, really happy that we're meeting today. Let me just say something really quickly. My wife will tell you this for sure. I have what's called like Frankenstein face, right? And then people are laughing, whatever. Yeah. So what I mean is my face just doesn't express the way that I would like to. So let me just, in a boring way here, let me just communicate. Really excited that we're speaking together. Very much think that there's a possibility here that you guys can get on the other side of this, and really hoping that we can have a productive dialogue on that. Does that sound okay? Okay, cool. And now we're moving forward, right? And now every time he tries to engage within that process, every time he talks about the human, checks in, whatever it is, we look at him as, yes, look at how much this guy cares. Yes, he's taking a step. We become an ally. We took this problem that he felt so embarrassed by, that he felt like, how do I behind the scenes outdo it? And he came to a place where he realized, like, hey, I know my stuff as a leader. I know how to do this. I know how to navigate. I know how to work. I know how to drive consensus here. And this is not going to be a barrier. This is not some huge problem, okay? It's a little piece of housekeeping to address in 30 seconds over a little laugh and a smile, right? And then we move on. That's ownership. That's pure ownership, right? So take it from Frankenstein face, okay? If he can do that, there's not a single aspect of your leadership that cannot be altered, that cannot be improved. There's not a single aspect of a negative that cannot be pulled back today with the right willingness to work it, the right willingness to take some action, right? This is where shift 3 comes in. And let's be very real with this, okay? Willpower is a lie. Willpower is a complete lie. The idea that you are somehow magically going to find your key to this and solve it is totally wrong, right? Under pressure, you never rise to the occasion, right? We fall to the level of our conditioning. And if there has been no conditioning, you're falling to the level that you're at right now or worse, right? As years go on and the problem gets unsolved, these predilections become worse, not better, right? You become more of a people pleaser. You become more of that old person who's sort of like a cautionary tale in some sense. You become more of that person who it's like, oh, yeah, don't talk about anything project related, right? This guy cannot help you with anything aside from that. It gets worse, right? Because without conditioning the fix, without conditioning a solve, you're conditioning the problem, right? And that's why all your reminders disappear. That's why that program that you tried to self-instruct for like 2 years ago is literally still sitting on your desktop unopened, right? Confidence evaporates. All of that will not survive stress, okay? A system will. So the press system, which is the system that I teach, it's a full operating system for leaders who are in this zone. Atypical, overlooked, overperforming leaders who know that they have a limited period of time to do it and need something that will hit every single one of the signal points that you need. Okay, so you're looking at this. These are the big five that we think of. Priming your presence. That means owning the room before you get in the room. Regulating under pressure, which means that your ability to withstand high levels of stress and conflict in the room go way up. You're expressing to influence, which means whether it's an email, in person, whatever, all of your comms hew to leadership principles and authority principles that support what you're trying to do instead of detract from it. No more of these garbage 2 to 3 a.m. Emails that you send out because you can't sleep that makes you think that you're managing people. Whereas everyone looks at that 3 a.m. timestamp and is like, oh God, we're going to have a terrible Friday today. That's not expressing the influence, right? Signaling executive authority is this high level stuff. It's how you can fully change narratives, let's say with a CEO who was marginalizing you a short time ago, right? How do you actually have that conversation to get the comp adjustment when they've refused you twice, right? What's the way to do that? That's now higher level. And then finally, solidifying the shift. All of this stuff has to feel natural. It has to feel like it's coming from you. It can't feel like you're putting on a performance. It cannot feel like secondhand clothes, okay? You cannot follow your way to this. This is an invitation to step forward and become the person that you know you've carried in your heart all this time, okay? It's here. It's the doorway, right? And so staying readable instead of reactive, stabilizing when the tension rises, holding center without forcing it, right? And what it relies on is exactly what we're talking about. Your state is stabilized first. Your words land clean, right? Silence works for you instead of against you. And authority becomes a consistent presence in your life that helps you, not a situational problem for you to solve, right? Basically, you stop needing people or conditions to be perfect in order to lead. That's unconditional. That's ownership. And that's the next level if you're willing to claim it. Not asking for permission, but knowing, having it, and being able to withstand all of it with less strum and drang, less pressure on the system, right? So when you're the stable reference point, right, everything changes. I discovered this myself after like literally a lifetime of proving it and being darn good at proving things, darn good at pitching, right? Darn good at selling, right? But nothing is like presence. Nothing shifts the room than a different you who shows up, right? Because that's when people will defer. That's when people will shift. You're going to see challenges soften. You're going to see everything move in a different way. And the reason why is because when your internal state matches the goals, matches the ambition, matches the truth that's coming out of your mouth, it makes people feel safe because congruence equals safety. And right now, there's doing, way too much doing, not enough confidence, not enough authority, not enough willingness to change, right? And no actions taken beyond the norm, right? And that's why it's not working. You're fostering an unsafety, and the overbalance is making that problem worse. That's the simplest way that I can explain what's going on here, okay? And the reason, by the way, and let me just call this out, the reason also it doesn't solve as fast as it could is because high performers and overperformers, you love to be in knowledge gathering mode. You love to like be researching, right? This is not a research problem. This is a like contact sport. This is a right here and right now. And if you treat it with that level of urgency, something can be done. If you treat this like it's freaking school, every single one of the leaders who pass by you, passed by for a reason, and they will continue to pass by for a reason, right? Because you're not dealing with the reality. You're avoiding reality through overwork, right? It just doesn't work, right? So how about this? Stop with the credentials, stop with the training, stop with adding more knowledge, stop with more performative techniques, right? Stop with all of that. How do we bring this into your body? How do we bring this into a place where it works for you? And that's really the huge advantage of operating a system instead of piecemeal, is because you'll always know, no matter where you are in that journey, here's what I need to deal with. Here's the aspect here of the OS that can solve this, that can help me address it. I'm going to be very quick about this, but it would I would be totally remiss if I didn't quickly touch this. Shame is a big factor behind overperformance, right? The need to perform, the need to do well has a lot of good qualities, but a lot of times it has this shame riding along with it, right? And I don't want to BS you and tell you that making a stand, rah, rah, implementing a system, rah, rah, is going to do it if you're not willing to do this, right? If you fundamentally know that there is a real problem in that self-identity piece, right? If you really know that it's there, I'm operating from a sense of that shame a lot of times, right? The way it'll come out is not going to be verbalized, but it'll be like hesitation disguised as thoughtfulness, right? It'll be like softened language when we need your brutal clarity, right? It's like retreat masked as, oh, I'm just being professional. I'm just being, like I'm in line with the culture. And it's compliance framed as collaboration. It lies to you. Shame lies to you and turns the bad into the good and the good into the bad, right? And internally, the dialogue is saying stuff like, hey, maybe they're right about me. Maybe I'm not actually ready. Maybe I need a little bit more time. Maybe this is the ceiling, right? Maybe I should just be happy with what I have. The moment those scripts activate, okay, in any level, that's an authority leakage moment, okay? And you've been in this moment. You've been in rooms where that voice has reemerged. Now, you didn't say it, but we all felt it. And when you're doing that in a high stakes moment, every time you do that, it's a breakage in your authority. It's a breakage in safety that we feel around you, right? Because you yourself don't feel safe, right? And so these scripts are behind the scenes, okay? These are the shame scripts that are sort of running, right? And I just want to call that out, not from a BS place, but to understand, yes, you can get a handle on this. Yes, you can change things. Something like this needs a protracted effort beyond just executive presence, right? For something like this, it requires being really courageous about minimizing the impact of this over time. And yes, drawing your motivation from positive wells that fill you up as opposed to shame and insufficiency, right? When you wake up, take it from me, when you wake up at 2 a.m. to go through client emails, that has nothing to do with your clients. That has nothing to do with you being on top of things. That has everything to do with fear and shame, right? And at the top, it's not like we don't have those things, but we're friends with them. We know how to move with them. We know how to understand. We know the beast, right? We're familiar with the beast, okay? I'm not scared of the beast, even though I know how powerful this beast is, right? And I know that that beast can also take me to some amazing places too, right? It's forging a new relationship with this aspect of yourself, right? One that actually helps you instead of constantly being this lame, negative hype man that you have behind the scenes who's tanking things, right? It affects all of this. We know this: timing, eye contact, right? What senior leaders experience that shame as is simply not ready or unsteady or risky, right? And so what'll happen is they're not going to say it, but they're going to cap how deeply they collaborate with you. They're going to cap how deeply you can go with them, right? So the lie that shame says beneath these scripts, right, is something like, if I can just fix myself internally, this is all going to stop, right? If I can just correct that, it's going to solve. And that's not the case, right? Again, containment is the key here, not removal, okay? We're not going to eliminate your vulnerability. We're not going to suppress it. We're just not going to let shame, vulnerability run the meeting. We're going to enable you, and you're going to enable you, most importantly, to act despite what those feelings are while acknowledging it, right? And that is what emotional mastery is, right? It's not suppressing emotion. It's not pretending you don't care or being bigger than. It's definitely not powering through, which is like trying to will your way through, right? It's letting the feelings register. It's letting that come in, but already knowing hey, if I hear that shame script, that's not a sign that something's gone wrong, because that shame script activates the second I start looking at something that can actually grow my life. So I'm anticipating it. I know that it's there. I know that I'm going to feel however I'm going to feel, but I also can say, yes, when it hits, I know that it's probably going to show up. Here's what I'm going to do to redirect. Here's where I'm going to move forward. Here's where I'm going to go back to myself to recenter myself so that I can keep moving forward as the leader that I am. You're not agreeing with its story, right? You're not, the shame can say whatever it wants. The fear can say whatever it wants. The second you act in accordance with it, and suppressing, by the way, is acting in accordance with it. That's why suppressing doesn't work. When you suppress an emotion, you are validating the emotion. Because by pushing it down, you're saying, this is so important, this is so dangerous, that it is worth me basically pretending to like disconnect from reality to actually do this. I can't acknowledge it. That's how dangerous it is, right? And the second you start acknowledging the truth of something, immediately the power reduces. That's why that jerk CXO, that's why you've got to have a conversation with him today, ideally, okay? Because you have to be able to have that back and forth. You cannot let this stuff harden, okay? When leaders never stabilize, right? You get things like your authority depends on good days. You get bad meetings that follow you home, even when you're playing with your kids and you're supposed to be beyond it, right? You get shame rewriting this narrative, right? And after a while, the instability becomes a part of your reputation, right? And the fear stops being this external thing, and the fear starts mapping into your decision tree. That is when it's too late, right? When I talk to someone or I get to know someone and they tell me, I'm fine, I'm confident, I've got this, right? And I hear their decision making, I can tell that the fear is operating on such a deep level, they don't even see the fear anymore. It's literally the hammer that closes down new ideas, change so hard, so fast. And that's fear becoming a chronic thing. You can't change that through your career. And you're certainly not going to change that through coaching or a shift. That's when it's too late. And guys, this isn't Disney. If things get too late, right? People lose out on opportunities. People stall out. People take retirement early. People have heart attacks and coronaries and all sorts of events, right? That take them out, right? So this shift here of stabilizing and really not letting that shame run it is really critically important. I remember working with over here and so great, right? And if you saw like, what's the headline here, right? You got a high-end controller role at a $2 billion company. Fantastic, fantastic, right? Amazing, amazing. Here's what you don't see, okay? When she was interviewing for this role, when she was doing that, a lot of times the Zoom session she would have is the apartment is crazy, right? Her family, her kids, they're in a huge transition of living spaces, right? Everything is up in the air. They don't know anything about what's going on. So guess what? She feels that. She knows that, right? But she can't come into these things and land opportunities like that if that's her state. So learning and teaching her how to manage that state, how to do simple, practical things so that for these engagements, right, she's showing up the way that she wants to. She's not rocked unduly. She's able to stand on message. This was absolutely critical because, guys, look, her external circumstances are different now. But if she had waited for something to change, if she had waited to be confident, or if she had waited for like another 2 or 3 months, do you really think she would have gotten it? Do you really think anything would have changed? You have to act in defiance of these feelings, and you have to be willing to act with a boldness that your emotions may not be ready for yet. They will catch up. They will catch up, but you have to move first. You have to act first if you have that capacity in you, right? If you don't, then I might really honestly say, stop making yourself miserable with aspirations because this is required, right? Here's the really scary one, right? Stop trying to do this alone, right? Isolation really is the final form of the senior doer trap, right? You're not stuck because you're missing information, right? You're stuck because you're inside the experience. You're inside your own blind spots. So I can even teach you, but you have no objectivity about what's going on. So you're going to go back to the office today, and it's going to be a continuation of exactly the same patterns. And after a little while, the nice motivational boost you got from this will be gone. And then you'll be right back where you started from, right? That's why I'll figure it out as a lie, right? I'll work on it. I'll reflect. You've given me a lot to think over. Let me think about this. Maybe when something changes, I just need time. All of that says you will not solve this problem. You're not willing to solve this problem. And why? Is because all of that really translates into, I want a solution. I want to fix, but I don't want to expose myself. I don't want to risk, right? I don't want to risk myself. I don't want to risk being a fool. I don't want to risk it. I want it done with safety. I want to feel confident before I act confidently, because then I can operate without a sense of risk. And that is why you are trapped right now. That's why. There cannot be a solve to this while you wait around. There can't. And I'm sorry, you're never going to get even close to the reassurances that you need beforehand. It's just not how it's earned, right? That's how you get to the top level, right? There's faith in yourself, in what you can do, in who you're like driving for and building for, right? And so none of this, all of this is a cop out at this stage. Okay. For you and the problem you're dealing with, none of that. That's all busy work garbage that will just ensure that the rest of this year becomes a continuation of the problems of the last. Okay. So all of this is what we need to start looking at. Okay. Tone, pacing, silence, boundaries, reactions under pressure, the exact second you start negotiating your state, right? These are the stuff that is almost impossible to see in yourself while you're trying to get it better. But when you're looking at it with an expert, when you have someone who can look at it objectively, someone who has no problems whatsoever giving you the hard truth, good, bad, or ugly, right? And someone who can say, do this, do that, but at a bottom line, it's your show. It's on you. Now you can move. Now acceleration can really happen, right? Because you're getting out of this distorted read of reality really quickly. And if we don't get you out of that read now, all of this is just floating on garbage, right? We need to get you to a place of truth, right? Third-party webinar where you feel comfortable being invisible, right, is really not going to be enough to solve this thing, right? And so trial and error, if you solve it, is years, okay? Time, momentum, reputation, optionality, and your appetite for risk are all currently being affected. They have all currently taken a hit as a result of this, right? If you're here, this problem didn't emerge last week. It's probably been there for years. So you have years of a transformation that needs to be corrected fast, okay? And there's no slow evolution here. There's no gradual. Is this person stepping forward with ownership now to the best of their ability or not? Okay, right now it's not. If you would like a little bit of help with this, what I can do, if this is useful, right? At the end of this, I'm going to open up a couple of spots for people who'd like to hop on with me one-on-one and look at this in a little bit more detail, right? See exactly like how to decode the behavior here, exactly what some practical next steps would be, and exactly the truth of what's going on here beyond your shame and distortion, okay? If you know that, and you know that, look, I'm sick and tired of being the lonely person in the room trying to solve this, here's what you would need to do. You want to go to this link here, if you can see it, hopefully, helloanish.com/presence-audit. When you click that, you're going to go to a simple page like this, 3 or 4 questions for me. Then it would go to scheduling, and there should be a couple of spots on my calendar. I've opened it up for the next 2 or 3 days. There should be a couple left there. Book a time, and let's jump on, and let's talk about this in more detail, okay? And let's get you the help that you need. Real quick, who is this not for, okay? This is not for anyone who has no intention of taking action, okay? This is not more information. If you need more knowledge, stay on the internet, right? This is not people who are like, woo, it sure would be, oh shucks, it sure would be neat to speak to an expert. That's a waste of both of our times, okay? People who've been broken down past the point of no return. If you know that fight is gone in you, you can't access the kid in you, you can't access the fire in you, it's all just about minimizing pain, probably not going to work. Okay. And the last one I would say is, if despite what we've been dialoguing here, you still secretly believe that you need to work harder than anybody else in that room, you need to carry more fear than anybody else in that room, and you need to carry more stress than anybody else in that room, skip this. Because if it's not clear, I don't believe that you're meant to be a glutton for punishment. I believe that you are meant to lead. I believe that you are meant to succeed. And I believe that when push comes to shove, when everything comes to shove, all of this adversity that you've been feeling is there to propel you to heights that you and your family and loved ones could have never imagined. That's what's the call. Are you brave enough to seize that? Are you brave enough to say, hey, I don't want to be anonymous anymore. I need some help. Anish, give me some help here. Let's see what's going on. If I can help you in a deeper way, or if coaching in a deeper way makes sense, we can talk about that. But the purpose of this call is really to be as helpful as I can, to really open something up here if you're done with the bullshit. Okay? Hope that makes sense, guys. Grab that link. If the spots are gone, and they should be filling up right now, recheck that link, grab the link, recheck it in about 24 hours. If I can open up a few extra, I will. If I can't, I guess that's it for this one. Okay, guys, great talking to you all. I hope this was helpful. Let me know what your reactions and thoughts are. Hop onto that, and hopefully I'll see you on that real soon. Okay, keep the pressure on.